Welcome to Game Design Hour, the podcast where I interview the people behind the video games you love. On today's episode, I'm interviewing Hendrik Baatz about his work on the video game Unrailed. Let's get into the interview. When did you first realize that you wanted to create video games?
I mean, I've dabbled with the thought while in high school a bit, but I mean, then I studied computer science and kind of moved in the direction more of working with rendering engines, right? Creating rendering engines, path tracing engines, and this stuff. And then just during one semester, we basically joined a course on game design, and then started creating a game, which was a first game, Unrailed, and I kind of stumbled into it.
How did you first think of the idea for Unrailed?
So yeah, as I said, Unrailed basically was created in this university course. And the idea of that course is that you have like 3 months to create this game, and each semester there's this topic, and the topic was Alfred Escher, which probably doesn't tell you that much, but it's basically a famous Swiss person. So for context, we studied in Switzerland. Anyway, Alfred Escher is a pretty famous Swiss person, and mostly famous for kind of creating the Swiss railway institution. And yeah, from this topic, it was basically a pretty easy like connection to get to making a game about the railway building. And also we like all the people that worked on this university project were pretty big fans of cooperative games, especially Overcooked. And so yeah, one thing led to another, and it was basically a pretty easy combination of the topic and the gameplay.
Beyond the topic and Overcooked, were there any other inspirations for Unrailed?
Unrailed has this like let's call it roguelite mechanic to it, where there's permadeath, right? So we were obviously inspired by a lot of roguelike games, for example, The Binding of Isaac or Risk of Rain for sure as well. Yeah, I mean there's like a huge wealth of Spelunky, also a big inspiration. But yeah, just basically the whole roguelike genre was an inspiration.
After thinking of the idea, what was your first step towards creating the game?
So basically the first thing we did was create like a physical prototype, which I have to think about. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 years now back. So yeah, basically you had this game board with square fields, and I mean it was actually pretty close to what the game is right now, but turn-based basically. So yeah, the first step was basically creating a physical prototype, working different things out there, and then I mean, since we only had like 3 months, we had to quickly go towards the actual implementation. But yeah, the first step was a physical prototype.
Were there any interesting ideas that you had considered about putting in the game at one point, but just decided to cut it?
Yeah, there were a couple. There was like, we thought about adding tunnels to the game. So the core mechanic of the game is you build a train track through these procedurally generated levels. And one of the ideas is to have tunnels where you could basically skip parts of the level. You just enter the tunnel with the train, and then the train comes out at the other part of the tunnel, or you just walk your players through them. But the problem was that it was not that easy to generate. I mean, we generate maps, right? They're not hand built, and it was hard to generate maps where the tunnels were placed meaningfully, so that they would actually add something to the gameplay. And so we cut them. Yeah. And then there were like other little things where like we have wagons that you attach to the train, right? And just as a joke, I had this wagon that was basically a toaster doing nothing. And then someone reacted to it saying, will we see more of this wagon in the game? I typed, sure, that it will appear in some way. But like I could never find any mechanic to actually put it into the game. So sadly, it's not yet in the game. Maybe one day I'll figure something out to put that one still in. I guess there's a couple of other things, but like those two are the ones that come to mind right now.
Many games with a robotic second player either give you no control over the player or way too much control, so you feel overwhelmed. How did you reach the balance that you have in Unrailed where the player still has control over it, but not so much that the player gets overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, but you described what we did. Like we had different kinds of prototypes for the AI counterpart of the player. So there was one version where it was just automatic. It would do all the stuff on its own. Basically, this is also a version we use internally to test our game, where we just have this AI bot that kind of does a couple of things. But yeah, so this was the extreme where the bot does everything, and then we had also this other extreme where you had to basically control every step. And I mean, yeah, then through a bit of community feedback, right? I mean, we always have this. We are pretty fortunate that we have a couple of players playing our game, and we have this experimental build of our game where we just test out new stuff and get feedback. And then, yeah, as I said, with the community feedback, this was like, yeah, it ping ponged around, and we kind of had like in the end, something that worked. And the idea was, so you control the bot basically via sending it emoji, which is also the way you communicate in the game. Or straight when you play with strangers, you can just send emojis. So we wanted to basically have something that would feel close to playing with other players online, which is why we ended up on this mechanic to just, yeah, send out emoji to control the bot. And yeah, maybe as an example, if you want the bot to, I don't know, chop down trees, you just send them a tree emoji saying, hey, we need more trees.
Managing scope is a very important part of game design. How did you work to manage the scope of Unrailed, and how did the scope change from your first idea to what you have now?
So yeah, as I mentioned before, the original scope of the game was just 3 months of work, right? With the goal to actually pass this course. There was no intent to ever release a game. And then we realized that, like, at the presentation of the course, where we would showcase the games afterwards for just the audience to play, we realized that this is a game that actually, it seems like people want to play. And we went with the game to some fairs and conferences, and yeah, this kind of then snowballed into us thinking, okay, maybe we just continue on this. Yeah, then we met a publisher, and right together with the publisher, we worked out this scope, the original scope, which was what we released at an early access title. And from then on, the scope kind of grew with the feedback we got from our community, where we got a lot of like great feedback and a lot of ideas. And then we are, in that sense, fortunate where we can just pick ideas and think about how would they impact the gameplay, and then yeah, just pick them if you like them. Yeah, just basically what we're doing right now.
How long after the first 3 months did you work on the game before the initial launch?
The university course, the lecture started beginning of 2018. So 3 months from then, we worked, well, I don't know, maybe 50%. Let's put it like that. And then we had, after that semester, we had a semester where we did not that much. We, yeah, kind of exhibited the game on some fairs, and also did some business development, finding publishers to finance working on it, like for a bit longer. And then basically the start of 2019, we started working full time, and then the release of the early access version was in September of the same year.
How large was the team that created Unrailed?
It fluctuates a bit, but the core team is basically 3 people that we're working full time on it, and then we've like different kinds of people we work from time to time on. For example, the team that does our music, those are 2 people, and then of course like our publisher that does all the publishing and marketing stuff. Yeah, which we didn't want to touch.
What was your process for creating each of the different game modes in Unrailed?
Yeah, another good question. So the original game mode is basically the endless game mode, which, well, we created, yeah, since we wanted to add this roguelite spin on the cooperative gameplay, right, and this task management gameplay. And then when we first started exhibiting the game, we noticed that for exhibiting a game, this basically endless gameplay doesn't kind of fit the attention span of the usual fairgoer. And so that's when we basically implemented specifically just for fairs, this quick mode where you just play through one map. And then we just put it into the game as well, since It's a pretty good game mode for people that just want to quickly play a map. And then the idea of versus mode came from talks with our publisher, where we kind of, we just spun around ideas. And then this idea of also having this versus mode in it came up. And we thought a bit about how we would do this. Like there were different kinds of versions of the endless mode, even one where the two trains are on the same map and they have to reach the same goal. And then there was a bit too much sabotage going on. So we decided to actually separate the two teams. Yeah, that was endless mode. And then the other new modes that those came actually from a lot of community feedback, where we had this core audience of also lots of players that try to get new high scores, where we basically picked up feedback and implemented it, and then try to work with the community on changing the things according to what people thought would work best. Yeah.
Fixing bugs is another big part of game development. Were there any strange or interesting bugs that you came across while working on Unrailed?
Yeah, basically the first week when we launched the game, which is obviously when the first time you have lots of players that can actually playtest your game, which wasn't our intention, but that's how it happened. So basically, when we played the game, we thought, players will probably reach like 1,000 meters or something like that. And by now, I think the record is somewhere over 10,000. And turns out there was some memory leak that would just happen if you play the game for excessive amounts of time. And that we just found out by just players cracking new high scores and running into these problems. So
you decided to have no voice chat in the game, even though it's a mostly cooperative-based game, though the cooperative elements still work. Can you tell me about that decision and how you work to make sure that players could still properly communicate without voice chat?
Just as a context, we do voice chat basically by giving the players a set of emojis that they can exchange between each other. So there's a couple of different ideas behind this. The first idea is usability. So having a chat, you have to open the chat. Voice chat is one thing. Sure, that works easy. But on the other hand, what you could do is just have a chat, but then you have to open the chat box and type in stuff. And the idea behind emoji is just you press the trigger button, and then with the joystick, you can just select emoji. It's easy, and you get the point across. And also from a perspective where we kind of want to curate the conversation, is that we can actually by selecting the set of emojis, we can select how the players interact, right? In that sense, we can kind of prevent negative interactions. So this is the other thing. And also we enforce productive interactions in the sense that the emojis are clear, right? If I send you a wood emoji, it means, okay, we need more wood on the train. Or if I send you a bucket emoji, it means the train's on fire. Someone needs to get water, or else we're going to derail here.
Were there any interesting game modes that you had thought about at one point that ended up getting cut?
As I said, we tried a couple of different versus modes, right? Yeah, I can go into more detail about this one mode where it was basically a big like square map, and you had each team start on a different end of the map, and the goal both teams had to reach the same goal in the center. And that was pretty cool in the sense that at first the teams were pretty disjoint from each other, working on their own thing. And then the closer they would get to the center of the map, they would like discover that, or they would see each other and then also try to sabotage each other, right? By taking tracks away, or just planting a dynamite next to the train. And I still like the idea a lot, but it just turned out way too chaotic, and it took away from the core gameplay of creating a train track to actually destroying a train track. Yeah. So that got cut in the sense.
Which parts of Unrailed did you have to put the most time and effort into to get just the way you wanted it?
One thing we put a lot of effort in is the mechanic to put down and pick up items, since like there's a couple of different things, different resources or items you have. It's kind of hard to make it easy to pick up the right thing. So if your player stands in front of a couple of different items, for the game itself, it's not always clear what you want to pick up, and then we have to do some predictions of what is the player most likely going to want, right? And making this feel good was not that easy, and I think we're at a decent point right now. And then also, sure, one of the other things is the train is always getting faster, right? And so the speed up curve is a thing that we've tweaked for a long time. We've like also gathered a lot of community feedback, and it's such a simple thing. It's just one function, but you can tweak it for a long time to get it just. You don't want to increase it that fast in the beginning, or else everyone is going to fail really quick. But then you also don't want to have like a very steep kink in it where it's just suddenly gets faster and then everyone fails at the same point. So it's a simple curve, but tweaking it is a lot of work. Yeah, more than we thought, at least.
Are there any fun little details that you've hidden in the game that you think most players will just kind of miss, but you found fun and interesting?
I mean, we wanted to add way more stuff than actually ended up in the game of these like Easter eggs, but there are a couple of like cute achievements that you can get. For example, there are a couple of animals, and in the first biome there's a cow, and you can, spoiler alert, you can pick up cows, and you can like, I don't know, 4 biomes later there's space, and you can just carry the cow into space, and that gets an achievement. Yeah, this is an example. There are a couple of achievements that are basically just us coming up with weird stuff for the players to do.
In many games, there are places where you have to wait for things to happen or wait for someone to do something. But in Unrailed, at least I always felt like there was something to do and I was never waiting on anything or anyone. How did you work to achieve that balance where the player is never waiting without having too many things that gets to the point where the player becomes overwhelmed?
So basically, there are usually 4 base jobs, right? The one person that chops down trees, one person that mines iron, the person that carries the stuff around, and the person that takes care of the train, and also plants the new tracks. And the thing is, if you just leave it like that, then you have always the same. I mean, if you play with 4 players, right, then each of the 4 players just does their job all the time, and it kind of works. And for this reason, we kind of introduced the bucket and the fire mechanic, which is a thing that requires your attention briefly, but not all the time. And it's just basically there to disrupt this setting, like the configuration of players, so that someone has to give up their job, and then this kind of scrambles around the roles a bit. And also we refrained from, I mean, there's lots of co-op games do this thing where you have like to switch a button like simultaneously, right? Or have just have to wait for some task to complete. And we didn't want to have this thing, because you just have to either wait for player or wait for a game mechanic, and we didn't want to have this in the game because it just takes out some of the intensity of the game.
What was the biggest design challenge you faced while working on Unrailed?
One of the challenges, like we have these wagons, right, to get you new abilities or get to train new abilities. Yeah, it's a bit the challenge that you want for each wagon to have a unique functionality, but you want to have also functionalities actually useful. Yeah, just basically coming up with different ideas that complement each other in the best case, but really don't take away stuff from each other. That's a big part of the things we added later to the game. The first part was actually come up with these 4 tasks I described earlier, right? Having this gameplay, this like second or 10-second to 10-second gameplay loop that works tightly, but then at a later stage adding new stuff to it without it taking away from the core gameplay. That was pretty tough to get right.
Do you plan to add any more content to Unrailed in the future?
Yes, we do. I don't want to say more than that, but yes, we do.
Looking back now, what do you wish you could have done differently before the initial launch?
It went, anyway, way better than we expected. A month or so before launch, we were pretty down, thinking, oh God, this is... what have we worked on here? No one is going to play this game. But in the end, it worked out way, way, way better than we ever expected. I mean, maybe relax a bit more before launch, but maybe test the game. Just do a bit more rounds of testing to have this, to find this bug I told you about, this memory leak where the game would crash after like 3,000 meters or so. That would be great, not having to do that in the first week. under stress, but I think we were pretty lucky with the way things happened.
What was the biggest lesson that you learned while working on Unrailed?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the biggest lessons is, as a game designer, you have this imagination of how people are going to play your game, but that's often not how they are going to play your game. So the biggest thing, I guess, I would like, so this was our first game, so we basically didn't know nothing about game design. So the biggest like recommendation, I guess, I would give newcomers is to just evaluate your game with actual players as often as possible, because oftentimes things will go wrong, like from a usability standpoints in places where you would have never imagined them going wrong.
What's next for you? What are you working on now?
We're working on a new game next to also doing stuff for Unrailed. Yeah. I can't say much more than that, but we're definitely working on something new, something very exciting.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been great interviewing you.
Thank you very much for doing the interview.
And that's how the interview went down. I want to thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the episode, consider following or subscribing to the podcast. Also, if you know a friend who you think might enjoy the podcast, send them a link to it. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with Game Design Hour, make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.